Do you know the difference between the woman who waits after a fight and one who finds peace, whether he returns or not? It's not in what she does with her hands, not in what she says with her mouth. It's what she does with her heart while he's gone. Let me tell you something I've learned over more than 2 decades of listening to broken and mended love stories, something that changed the way I understand why some bonds survive the storm, while others vanish with the first strong wind. For years, women have asked me the same question. How can I get him back after an argument? But the real question, the one that truly hurts and ultimately heals, is this. How can I stay with myself when everything's falling apart? Because a man's loyalty, the thing so many women seek as if it were the holy grail of love, is not won through pleading or shrinking yourself so he can feel bigger. It's not secured by sacrificing your soul at the altar of reconciliation. It's earned by being someone who can withstand the storm without breaking. Someone who doesn't lose herself. Someone who doesn't disappear in the desperate attempt to hold everything together. Just a few days ago, a woman sat across from me and said, "Doctor, when we argue, I feel like everything is crumbling. Like I build a house of cards and every harsh word is an earthquake." And I asked her, "What if I told you the house collapsing isn't yours, but the one you built for him?" The silence that followed was long. Not the silence of confusion, but the silence of someone seeing herself in the mirror she never expected. The silence of awakening. You see, during an argument, something happens inside a man's body that many women don't fully understand. His nervous system goes into survival mode as if he's facing a real threat. His heart pounds like a war drum. His thoughts cloud in a thick mental fog, and the primal voice deep in his brain whispers, "Protect yourself, get away, survive." It's not that he doesn't love you. It's that in that moment, his body confuses love with war. It confuses intimacy with danger. It mistakes your pain for a personal attack. But here's what I've come to know what decades of sitting with heartbreak has taught me. It's not the fight that destroys a relationship. It's what happens afterward. It's the silence that cuts like an invisible blade. The coldness that settles like frost on glass. The pride that builds stone walls where once stood bridges of understanding. When a woman reacts to his distance with more distance, when she responds to his silence with silence soaked in resentment, when she interprets his need for space as personal abandonment and emotionally abandons him first, something more fragile than love begins to break. Trust. And trust is not the belief that he'll never hurt you. Because real love always includes pain. It's part of being truly seen, truly known. Trust is knowing that when pain comes like rain, you both will find your way back to each other. Like 2 travelers lost in a storm who still remember the way home. I've seen beautiful, brilliant, successful women admired by the world shrink into small versions of themselves after an argument. They walk on eggshells, as if the ground might give way. They measure every word, fearing it might become poison. They monitor his every move like detectives of their own love story. But love does not thrive in fear, and peace does not grow in a house built on insecurity. A woman who finds peace whether he returns or not is not cold. She is rooted. She knows her worth is not up for negotiation. She knows that real love, true, enduring, soul deep love requires 2 whole hearts, not one person holding up the roof alone. And he feels it. He feels it in the air, like a quiet current of tension running through her body. He sees it in the way she looks at him. Eyes filled with silent questions, scanning his every move for signs of rejection, like someone watching for symptoms of an invisible illness. And then something terrible, yet predictable, happens. He begins to pull away, not because he stopped loving her, but because he no longer feels like he can be himself, not without disappointing her. It's as if every word is measured, every silence mistaken for a sentence. His very humanity becomes too heavy, too imperfect for the woman who says she loves him. Have you been there? In that space where love becomes confusion, where the boundaries between you and him vanish, where his mood sets the temperature of your entire day, where his silence becomes your deepest anxiety, where his approval feels like your only oxygen. That's a dangerous place, an emotional no man's land, where the air grows thin and every word is heavy, because from there, even the smallest argument feels like an existential threat. It's no longer just about the dishes or where you'll spend the holidays. It's a terrifying sense that your entire self-worth is hanging by a thread, tied to someone else's ability to love you in that moment. Your identity built, brick by fragile brick, around the idea of being loved by him. But let me tell you a different story. A woman once came into my office, weary, aching, worn thin by years of love stories that all ended the same way. Always chasing, always pleading, always trying to fix what was broken, with her own bloodied, trembling hands. And with a voice that was both broken and burning with a quiet fire, she said, "Doctor, I'm tired of loving like my life depends on it. I'm exhausted from turning love into a matter of survival." So I asked her, gently as any open wound deserves, what if real love begins when your life no longer depends on it? What if true love is born the moment you realize you can live without it, but choose not to? We worked together for months, walking the winding halls of her heart, unraveling the myths and fears that had led her to lose herself again and again in the love of others. And slowly, quietly, something shifted. She didn't become colder. She didn't build walls. She didn't love less. She became present, grounded, rooted in her own emotional soil. She began to feel her feelings without fear, to speak her truth without apology, to exist without bending to be wanted. And then one day, something changed. She had an argument with her partner, the kind of moment that, in the past, would have shattered her. He pulled away, as he always did when he felt overwhelmed. But this time, she didn't chase. She didn't shrink. She didn't freeze in fear or spin into a strategy to fix what might not be broken. She simply breathed. Breathed deeply, like someone breaking the surface after being underwater too long. And in that space between stimulus and response, in that sacred pause where most people react from fear, she did something extraordinary. She loved him without suffocating him. She missed him without chasing him. She wanted him without needing him. And that night, he came back. Not because she pulled him. Not because she followed the script. Not because she performed emotional acrobatics. But because, for the first time in a long time, he didn't have to leave just to breathe. Her love didn't trap him. It freed him. It didn't demand. It invited. It didn't beg. It welcomed. And weeks later, with a quiet smile that seemed to rise from the deepest part of her, she looked at me and said, "Do you know what the most beautiful part of that experience was? It wasn't that he came back, though yes, that made me happy. But that wasn't the most important thing. It was that I was okay if he didn't. It was the quiet revelation that my peace no longer depended on his decisions, that my center was no longer tied to his presence. And that is the paradox of mature love. The beautiful contradiction that confuses the mind but frees the heart. We can only truly hold on to what we are willing to let go of. We can only attract what we are not chasing in desperation. We can only receive the love we are not begging for. But let me be clear, because this is where so many misunderstand. I'm not talking about cold indifference. I'm not talking about emotional games or pretending to be strong while secretly falling apart, like a sandcastle collapsing behind a brave smile. No, I'm talking about something much deeper, something quieter, yet infinitely more powerful. I'm talking about the kind of love that comes from wholeness, not from lack, from emotional abundance, not from emptiness craving to be filled. When a woman can hold her own emotional storm without casting its shadows over the man she loves, when she can sit with her own pain without handing it to him like a burden he must fix or carry, when she can miss him deeply and still not turn that longing into a demand. Something changes in the very chemistry of the relationship. He feels it. He feels the freedom. And in that freedom, he returns. Not because he's guilted into it, not out of duty or pressure, but because he wants to. And here's what I've seen again and again across years and continents, in stories whispered through tears and triumphs. Men don't run from real love. They never have. They run from need masquerading as love, like a wolf in sheep's clothing. They run from emotional dependency dressed as generous devotion. They run from the crushing weight of someone's existential fear, wrapped in what looks like tender affection, but toward a woman who can love without clinging, like a vine suffocating the tree it needs, who can give without disappearing in the act of giving, who can be vulnerable without becoming fragile, like a leaf tossed in the wind. He does not run. He breathes. He softens. He stays. Because that kind of love doesn't ask him to save her. It invites him to meet her whole to whole, soul to soul, free to free. Towards a woman like that, a man doesn't flee like a frightened animal. He moves toward her with respect, with admiration, with a deep, quiet recognition that he has found something rare, something extraordinary. Do you remember the last time you argued with someone truly important to you? Do you remember what happened in your body when the words turned sharp and the air became thick with tension? Maybe you felt it, that familiar sensation, the quiet panic creeping up your spine, the fear that everything was falling apart for good, the urgent impulse to fix it fast, the desperate need to hear that he still loved you, despite the words, despite the silence. That's normal. That's human. But what you do with that primal wave of emotion, how you respond to that inner storm, that's what makes the difference between love that expands and love that suffocates, love that nourishes and love that depletes. There's something I've come to recognize, something I call emotional softening. And no, it's not blind submission. It's not about doing whatever he wants to keep the peace. That's not softness. That's erasure. True emotional softening is something far wiser, far stronger. It's the ability to soften your energy without softening your truth, to remain fully intact, rooted in yourself, while creating space for reconnection. It's the silent strength to say without pleading, without begging, I'm here. I'm not your enemy. Even if the pain in this moment makes us feel like opponents, the space between us is still safe when you're ready to return. When a woman can do this, truly do this, when she can be soft without being weak, when she can yield without disappearing, when she can welcome without abandoning herself, something shifts inside him. His nervous system begins to settle. The ancient alarm bells in his body start to quiet. His heart tightly closed like a fist begins to open, like a flower turning slowly toward the light after a long, hard storm. But here's the truth too many overlook. This only works if it comes from something real inside you. If softness is a strategy, a manipulation disguised as grace, he'll feel it. Just as animals sense earthquakes before they strike, a man senses the difference between water drawn from a spring and the water manufactured in a lab. Real softness is not weakness. It is strength wrapped in gentleness. It is knowing you can withstand what comes, like an oak tree that bends but does not break. I've seen women change entire relationships, not by fixing the man, but by transforming their relationship with themselves, especially in the moments after a fight. Instead of shrinking like someone hiding from the storm, they become more present, like someone anchoring themselves at the center of chaos. Instead of chasing like a hunter afraid of losing prey, they stand in quiet dignity, knowing love cannot be hunted, it must be invited. Instead of begging like emotional beggars for crumbs of affection, They become a space where love can grow again naturally. But I've also seen the opposite. Women trapped in loops of pain, softening when they should be setting boundaries, welcoming when they should be stepping back, forgiving when they should be protecting themselves. Because here's what must be understood clearly and without confusion. Not every relationship deserves your softness. Not every man deserves your tenderness. If he uses your compassion as a weapon, if he interprets your understanding as permission to hurt you, if he mistakes your patience for weakness to exploit, then the answer is not to be softer. The answer is to be clearer, to define yourself with firmness, not fade into accommodation. A mature woman knows when to open the door and when to walk away. She knows that love has seasons, and so does the soul. She knows when her softness is healing medicine, and when its poison slowly eroding her spirit. She knows that she can be gentle and powerful, like water, that she can caress or carve mountains. And most of all, she knows this, that she can love deeply without losing herself in the process. Have you ever noticed how small children run to their mothers when life scares them? It doesn't matter if mom was angry 5 minutes ago. If they were scolded, corrected, or sent to their room, they run to her anyway. Because deep down, in some instinctual, wordless place, they know mom is safety. Mom is home. That is the energy of a woman who has learned to love from emotional maturity. She becomes a refuge for the soul, not because she lacks boundaries, but because her boundaries are so clear, so loving. They create a space where authenticity is welcome, where vulnerability can finally breathe. In that sacred space, a man can be imperfect without being rejected as defective. He can have hard days without being discarded like damaged goods. He can show his full humanity without losing his place in your heart. But he also knows this space has invisible, unshakable rule. That safety is not permission for cruelty. That understanding is not tolerance for emotional neglect. That love is not the absence of limits, but the presence of loving ones, boundaries that protect the sanctity of connection. I remember a woman who came to me once, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion and tears. "Doctor," she said, "I think I've been confusing love with emotional rescue. Every time he pulls away like a wounded animal, I feel like it's my job to save him from his moods, from his silence, from himself. But I'm tired of being the emotional paramedic of this relationship, tired of always living in emergency mode." And I asked her gently, sincerely, as someone who truly wanted to understand, what if he doesn't need to be rescued? What if he just needs to be seen? Seen in his full humanity, without being fixed, without being saved, without being repaired like a broken machine? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do after a fight is not to fix him, not to chase him, not to contort yourself into comfort he hasn't asked for. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is trust that he can find his way back, like a traveler who knows the road home, to be there when he returns with open arms, but not desperate ones, like branches that welcome the wind, but do not beg for it, to love with a heart that's available, but not begging, to offer without demanding, to give without turning love into a transaction, something owed in return. That is the difference between a woman who waits in fear and one who waits in love. One waits like a puzzle missing a piece, hoping he'll return so she can feel whole again. The other is already whole, and her door is open, not because she needs him to complete her, but because she honors him enough to invite him into her wholeness as a guest, not a savior. And men, they feel this difference with astonishing precision. They feel it in your voice, like music that rings in a different key. They feel it in your body, in the stillness you carry, in the energy you radiate even when you're silent. toward a woman who embodies inner wholeness, a man is not drawn by pressure or guilt. He is drawn by admiration, by respect, by the almost mystical sense that being near her makes him better. Not because she fixes him, but because she inspires him to rise into his own greatness. Do you want to know the question I've been asked more than any other? Over the years, I've listened to broken hearts. How can I make him choose me over all the others? But that's not a question that changes lives. The real question is this: how can I choose myself so fully, so fiercely, so completely, that anyone who chooses to walk beside me is also choosing the best of themselves in the process? Because real loyalty, the kind that lasts through the storms, that deepens over years like roots in the earth, is not built on desperate need. It's built on conscious choice. The daily decision of two whole people to build something together, not because they can't live without each other, but because they are more alive, more real, more powerful together. When a woman can be in love without losing herself in it, when she becomes the ocean, vast and alive, not defined by the tides that come and go, then she becomes not a harbor for a man to dock in, but a sea he longs to sail again and again. When she can love deeply without loving desperately, like someone who breathes love rather than begs for it. When she can be vulnerable without being dependent, like someone who opens from strength rather than from need. She becomes the kind of woman a man never wants to lose, not because he fears emptiness without her, but because her presence fills him with infinite gratitude. And that gratitude, my dear, that sacred, quiet gratitude, is the soil where real loyalty takes root. It is the ground where authentic commitment grows, where love that transcends time is built brick by soulful brick. Over the years, I've witnessed transformations that have changed the way I understand love, not as a fleeting emotion, but as a force of nature. I've seen women walk into my office feeling invisible, like ghosts haunting their own lives, unseen, unvalued, like buried treasure never claimed. I've seen them carry the weight of anxiety as if living in a minefield, bracing for the next explosion, apologizing for taking up space, mistaking survival for connection. And I've seen them awaken. I've seen them rise, not with anger, but with clarity, not with walls, but with presence. They didn't just change their relationship, they changed their lives. Something lit up inside them, something ancient, something true. And that light, once ignited, poured into every corner of their existence, like dawn breaking over a long, cold night. Because once a woman remembers her worth, she doesn't beg for love, she becomes love. And from that place, everything begins to change. They didn't become harder, like stones that feel nothing. They became more real, like fertile soil where everything joy, pain, love, growth can take root and bloom. They didn't become less loving, like hearts that shut down to survive. They became wiser in the way they love, like someone who has finally learned the soul's secret language. And in that deep remembering, they discover something beautiful, something that forever changed their relationship with love. That when you love from inner wholeness, when you can offer your heart without mortgaging it, when you give without expecting repayment, when you are entirely your own, even while sharing your life with another, love stops being an exhausting negotiation and becomes a celebration where both people win. That is the kind of woman who's never forgotten. Not because she performs emotional circus acts to be remembered, but because the way she loves leaves a mark that cannot be erased, like fire imprinted on metal. She doesn't collapse into despair after a fight because she knows her worth isn't tied to the emotional temperature of the relationship, like a broken thermometer swinging with every mood. She doesn't play psychological games, because she understands that real love needs no strategy, just as truth needs no makeup. She welcomes without abandoning herself, because she has learned the deepest surrender comes not from emptiness seeking to be filled, but from a conscious, sacred choice. And when a man finds a woman like that, when he realizes he can be fully human in her presence, without losing his place in her heart, something awakens in him. Not just desire, not just attraction, reverence, that sacred recognition which inspires poets, moves mountains, and silences everything that is shallow. And a man who feels reverence for a woman doesn't leave her after a fight like someone running from a storm. He finds his way back again and again, because he knows that in her arms, he doesn't just find love as an emotion. He finds home as a state of the soul. But remember this clearly and without illusion. You cannot manufacture reverence. You cannot force someone to feel what they are not capable of feeling. You can only cultivate the inner conditions so that if he has it in him, there is a sacred place for it to rise. And if he doesn't, if even after your greatest softness and your clearest truth, he still chooses distance as refuge, silence as punishment, coldness as armor, then your gift to yourself is not to chase him, like someone chasing shadows. Your gift is to remember who you are, and to recognize that you deserve someone who can receive and value the rare treasure you have to give. Because a woman who has learned to love from emotional maturity does not beg for breadcrumbs from someone who cannot see her worth, like gold mistaken for common stone. She knows her love is sacred, a treasure. And treasures are not thrown where they cannot be honored, like pearls before swine. That woman walks through the world with a silent dignity that does not need to be announced. You see it in her posture, like someone who knows her worth. You hear it in her voice, like music that doesn't need volume to be beautiful. You feel it in her presence, like a perfume that lingers, not because it's heavy, but because it's unforgettable. And that dignity, that ability to love herself enough not to lose herself in love for others, like someone dissolving into the ocean, that is the quality that transforms everything. Like an emotional philosopher's stone, it changes how others see her. A mirror reflecting the truth of her inner world. It changes how she treats herself as a temple, not a battleground. And it changes how she moves through life, like someone who knows her destiny, who walks in purpose, who no longer begs for a seat at tables unworthy of her presence. Above all, it transforms the kinds of relationships she allows. No longer ones that drain, like emotional vampires, but ones that nourish. No longer ones that consume, like wildfires, but ones that inspire. No longer ones that simply tolerate her, but ones that truly celebrate her as someone who will never again accept the unacceptable. And when you find someone who can dance with you at that level, someone who can receive your love without trying to possess it like an object, who can offer his own love without losing himself in the process, like someone who gives without disappearing, you'll discover something extraordinary. That loyalty is not something you have to chase, like an elusive butterfly. It's something that rises naturally. When two whole people choose to walk side by side for a while, creating something beautiful without destroying who they already are on their own. That is the invitation I offer you today. Not as a command, but as a possibility. Not to become someone who makes a man stay by using psychological tricks or emotional gymnastics, but to become someone so at ease within herself that she only keeps what adds beauty to her life. Not drama, not chaos, but depth. That is the kind of woman who is never forgotten. Not because she is perfect, like a marble statue carved without flaw, but because she is real, like rich, living soil where wild gardens can grow. Not because she lives without conflict, but because she knows how to navigate storms with grace, like a seasoned captain who knows how to read the winds. And that woman, dear one, that wise, that powerful, that deeply alive woman, she already lives within you, like a seed, waiting, patient, faithful. She's not far away. She's just waiting for you to let her out, to let her bloom, to let her show the world the quiet beauty that has always been there, waiting to be seen. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, like changing clothes. It's not performance, it's a process, a slow unfolding, like learning a new language of the heart, an awakening that happens layer by layer, like peeling an emotional onion, until you reach the luminous center of who you truly are. Some mornings, you'll wake up feeling that strength pulsing through you, like a river flowing with certainty to the sea. Other days, it will feel like a whisper, barely audible beneath the noise of your oldest fears. And both days are perfect. Both are part of the journey toward a more mature, more conscious, more powerful way of loving. What matters is not the speed of the journey, but the direction, not the perfection of every step, but the refusal to go back to patterns that hurt you, to ways of loving that made you smaller, instead of greater. Because when a woman begins a journey toward her own emotional wholeness, something shifts, not just in her, but in everything around her. Like a stone dropped into a still lake, the ripples reach far and wide. Men who once ignored her begin to notice. Her presence becomes valuable to those who once took her for granted. Those who toyed with her feelings begin to show her respect, not because she's changed her appearance or memorized clever lines, but because something fundamental has reconfigured within her, something sensed without words, felt without explanation, recognized the way we recognize truth, the moment we see it. That is the quiet magic of becoming who you truly are. You no longer need to chase love. Love finds you. You no longer need to beg for respect. Respect rises naturally. You no longer need to plead for loyalty. Loyalty becomes a gift, freely given. And if something in these words stirred your soul, if some deep part of you whispered, "Yes, I remember this truth," then know this. You've already begun. You are already walking the path. You already are that woman who is never forgotten, because she has finally remembered never to forget herself.